Okay, so we're going to go over the next steps for your negative space drawing. So you should have your thumbnail sketches. You are going to select the best four of those and make those into a larger drawing. And remember, the idea of these is to really think about composition. We're not thinking about the subject matter as being your drawing, but the negative space is in between. So if I was looking at an image like these leaves, you know, I'm making my drawing all the negative spaces in between, not the leaves itself, so that my drawing will look something like this at the end. Now, the idea is that you're trying to balance the positive and negative space so that they're equally balanced. In each one of your drawings, you should have an equal amount of white space and black space, and they should feel like they're equally balanced. If they're not, you're going to have to think about altering or changing your drawing. That's why we're starting off with an underdrawing. And what you choose or how close you choose to focus in on those objects is going to be up to you. You want to think about looking at small details, creating interesting spaces in between, um, really thinking about how you can balance those two spaces. So, like I said, you already have completed your thumbnails. You're now going to look back at those thumbnails and decide which ones you're going to make into your finished drawings. The first step in this is actually going to be preparing your paper. So you need to use a piece of your Strathmore drawing paper. Do not use your newsprint for this. The ink will bleed right through it. You're going to take a piece of that 18 by 24 inch Strathmore drawing paper and divide it into 4 parts. You should tape the whole paper down to your board. So you need that sturdy drawing board because it's going to help stabilize the drawing. If you get your paper wet, what happens to paper when you get it wet? It gets all wrinkled and sort of bubbles up. The same thing will happen if you put ink onto your paper if it's not taped down. When you tape down the paper on all 4 sides, if the paper starts to lift up or bubble a little bit, it will flatten back out from the pressure of the tape. So once that moisture leaves the paper, it's going to flatten back out to the same shape. If it wasn't taped down, it would remain in that sort of bubble, crumped up form. So we don't want to do that. If you don't have a board at home, we do have some at the school available to pick up. Hopefully you picked it up already from one of those pickup days we had the past couple weeks. You could also use a wall. You can use any kind of hard piece of foam board. They sell for like $1 or $2 at the store. Or you could also use a piece of masonite from Home Depot. They sell it for like $3 or $4. We're going to use a drawing board a lot this semester, so you have to make sure you have that drawing board, not just for this project, but for future projects too. Okay, so once you have it taped down, you're going to do 4 small drawings. So each one of those drawings is going to be about 9 by 12. So you can think when we're done, we're going to take the tape off and you're going to be able to cut all 4 of these apart, or you can keep them together as well. So I'm going to do a sped up version of the demo. As you're drawing, you don't have to draw the edges perfectly at first. You can see I've kind of lightly sketched out some of the bigger areas. And then I'm coming back in and just focusing on small details on those outlines. So, but you can't just instantly draw the outlines perfectly. You can kind of map out some bigger spaces with a lighter pencil. Now I'm using my HB drawing pencil because it's the easiest to erase. It's also going to be the easiest to sort of press lightly or harder on. You want to try to press as lightly as you can. I'm pressing a little bit dark here just so you can see it in the demo. Once you've completed all those pieces, you can see at the very end, I came back in with the eraser and I erased out any kinds of in-between lines. So I originally did have some extra lines to help me figure out where the leaves are or where the leaves were overlapping. I want to go back in and erase out any of those lines that are overlapping because they're not going to be in my finished piece. Remember, we're not drawing any details of the interiors of the leaves or rocks or whatever it is that you're drawing. We're just focusing on the negative spaces, so there should be no interior details. Once you get the drawing mapped out, remember you're going to do 4 of these. I'm just going to go on to the next step. Imagining you have 4 mapped out, you are going to post it into the discussion post just so you can get some advice before you go to the ink. Remember, the ink you can't erase. So if you make a mistake, you kind of got to live with it and roll with it. That's why you want to erase out any extra lines you don't want. We're also going to post it because you want to make sure that your positive and negative space is balanced. Sometimes people take something away, sometimes they'll add something in that process. Once you add the ink, you can't do any more of that editing, so that's why we're kind of going to pause and put it in the discussion post, and then you'll come back and do the finishing touches. So here's a sped up version of me inking. You can use your Micron pen or Sharpie for the details of the edges. You can see I'm using it there in some spots. It's important that you don't do a hard line, but you actually kind of come out a little bit so that you can blend it in with the ink. If you do a really hard edge outline with the Micron pen or Sharpie, they're slightly different colors, so it looks real obvious, the line in between. So you want to kind of mask that by doing sort of a rougher edge. Sometimes you'll have to do 2 coats with the ink to get it to cover evenly. Try not to water it down too much because that can also kind of add to some unevenness in the ink. You should have a Sumi ink brush. You'll also see there's going to be a link to show you how to help use that Sumi ink brush. If you want to use regular brushes for this project, you can. We're going to use the Sumi ink again when we do our value drawing, so you'll get to use your Sumi ink brush and ink again during that project. So as you start to fill in the ink, if you make any mistakes on the edges, like I said, this is, once it's dry, you can't erase it. It absorbs into the paper, so you gotta kind of roll with it and try to edit and fix anything. Slightly alter the edges if you have to. Once it's totally dry, then you can go in and get any of those little fine pencil marks that you have left over to erase as a finishing project. You're going to do the same thing for your other 3 drawing spaces left on there. And then once it's done, you'll remove the tape and you'll have 4 little separate drawings that you will post to your assignment post.